If I went to the Egyptian desert at the time that this story is alleged to have taken place in history, would I see a mass movement of Israelites?
Let's take it apart rationally.
Oh my God. Materially, what do we see? What is the material, physical reality of what we see?
I would say that's not my problem.
It is your problem. The whole point of language is to make things understood to other minds. Do you materially think there was a Jewish exodus from Egypt? That's all I want to know. So Alex is trying to separate out all the other shit. I just want to know that one thing. Let's see what he says to this.
Yeah, well, literal is a very hard thing in a circumstance like that. It isn't obvious to me at all which of those two accounts is more real.
Suppose that you were a witness to this crime. The police pull you into questioning as a witness.
Yeah.
And they say, we're trying.
Oh my God, hold on, wait. You're a witness to a crime. Oh boy, what does he say here?
Yeah.
They're trying to get your help. Dr. Peterson, what happened?
Look at the Jordan Peterson stuff for Alex O'Connor. 11 hours ago. Okay.
Like, what does that mean?
It's like, is this just gonna be another conversation of like Peterson speaking in metaphor, basically, of like, what does it mean when we say that the God is real and that the Christianity had this and that, and like, what do we think and blah, and Carl Jung's the archetypes. It's like, okay, let's see.
Historically, no one knows.
I agree. I don't think
Right.
that at least most of Genesis or parts of Genesis are supposed to be. I mean, the Bible is a library, right? It's not a book, and that means that it's going to contain different genres.
That's for sure.
And so when
and some of them are more historically accurate, and some of them tilt more towards that kind of elusive. I don't mean elusive in the. I mean ALLUSIV.
Elusive, yeah, sure.
Right. That elusive and symbolic form that characterizes Genesis 1.
So
sure.
because there are different genres here, it depends on what story we're talking about. And I think that what I often observe you doing is we might talk about Christianity, and if you aren't comfortable committing to a historical ideal, you'll start talking about the spirit moving over the face of the waters, which is obviously a much more mythological ideal, and not quite equivocating them, but moving between them too quickly and not delineating them enough. So quite equivocal waters, which comfortable committing to a historical ideal, you'll start talking about the spirit moving over the face of the waters, which is obviously a much more mythological ideal, and not quite equivocating them, but
did he mean to say not quite equalize? No, what's the other? I don't even remember the other word. People f this up so much. I don't think he meant equivocation. I think he meant equating them. We've got an equivocation error. Heads up. No, he did mean equivocate. He actually might have meant equivocate. Oh, fuck. Okay, hold on. I need all my brain power for this. 1 second. Before I call somebody out an equivocation error.
That elusive and symbolic form that characterizes Genesis 1.
So because there are different genres here, it depends on what story we're talking about. And I think that what I often observe you doing is we might talk about Christianity, and if you aren't comfortable committing to a historical ideal, you'll start talking about the spirit moving over the face of the waters, which is obviously a much more mythological ideal, and not quite equivocating them, but moving between them too quickly.
No, he did mean he should have used equating. That was an equivocation error. Equivocate does not work here. No, but it's not a big deal. Who the f cares?
Which is obviously a much more mythological ideal, and not quite equivocating them, but moving between them too quickly and not delineating them enough. So if I asked you, do you think that the spirit moved across the face of the waters, and you said to me something like, I think it's still happening.
Right, that is what I would say.
Hey, fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense.
It always happens. It happened at the beginning of time, and it's always happening.
When somebody says, did the Exodus story happen? Did the Jews enslaved in Egypt break free of their slavery and move to the Promised Land across the desert for 40 years? Did that happen? You have also said, of the Exodus specifically, it's still happening.
Yes.
Now, to me, that's far more inappropriate than saying that the spirit is still moving across the face of the waters, because I think what people mean there is, do you believe that these people in that time period actually did this in such a way that, for instance, might show up in an archaeological report?
Well, I think that's the simplest answer to that is probably.
Sure, and that's fine too. But
we don't know. To the degree that there's been archaeological investigations into the kinds of biblical narratives that you've described, the archaeological evidence tends to fall on the side of historical accuracy in relationship to the Bible, quite surprisingly often.
Clearly, you're...
Wait, hold on. Just to be clear, my understanding is there's zero historical accuracy. Or I'm sorry, there's zero historical evidence for Jews ever mass exiting Jesus, or Christ, Egypt. There's no evidence for any exodus of Jewish people from Egypt, ever. I don't think that's ever been displayed anywhere, archaeologically, historically. I think the Bible is
one of the things.
I think the Bible is the only source for that.
You spent more time in Exodus than probably any person I've ever met in person, right? Clearly the story sort of captivates you and you think it's really important and can teach you a lot, right?
Yeah,
of course.
it's infinitely deep story.
I think most people speaking to you already know that you think that, right? And so when they ask you a question, when they suddenly say to you, but do you think it really happened?
Well, what the hell does that mean?
Oh my, what do you mean? What does it mean? Did it actually factually happen? Like factually in history, were there thousands or tens of thousands or whatever of Jewish people that fled, Egypt and crossed the fucking Sinai? Like, did that actually happen? That's pretty obvious what people mean. They're asking you for a material factual analysis, right? Please explain equivocate to me. Equivocating is when you are trying to obscure the meaning of a particular thing by using something that might be like disingenuously like softer or different generally, right? So like, let's say I say something like, well, last night I kind of got into an argument with my wife and we maybe got a little bit loud at each other. Well, let's say what actually happened was like I screamed at her that she was a stupid cunt, wanted to kill herself immediately, and then I'm going to murder her whole family, right? Somebody said, hold on, you got into an argument and you were loud? A bit of an equivocation, don't you think? That's equivocating.
Think that, right? And so when they ask you a question, when they suddenly say to you, but do you think it really happened?
Well, what the hell does that mean?
You must know that what they mean is what I was talking about a second ago, which is that sort of...
What? Okay, so fine. So it's easy just to turn this around.
It can be used to say someone is avoiding committing to a specific position, which is what Jordan B. No, shut the fuck up. No, that's not what it means. If I say, hold on, sir, it seems like you're equating between these two things. You're equating murder with self-defense or whatever. You wouldn't say you're equivocating murder with I mean, like you could, but it would be like a stretch and it would be a weird thing. You would just say like, it feels like you're equivocating on the murder. It feels like you're equivocating. You wouldn't say equivocating between two things. I'm not sure if I've ever seen equivocation written properly like that, where you're equivocating between two things. It's the second definition here. We're not talking about the definition. We're talking about the use of the word. I don't think you would generally say you're equivocating between these two things. I just don't think you would say you're trying to equate these two things. And if you plug equate into the sentence, it works a lot more cleanly. It works completely 250. Like
you aren't comfortable committing to a historical ideal, you'll start talking about the spirit moving over the face of the waters, which is obviously a much more mythological ideal. And not quite equivocating them, but moving between them too quickly.
You're moving between two ideas too quickly, and you're equating this mythological idea with the actual physical reality. You're equating the two of these things, right? And you're moving between them too quickly. That makes perfect sense. You don't move between two things too quickly that you're equivocating, like in a very, very, very abstract sense, maybe, but equate is the word that we're looking for. Equate perfectly maps onto the entire rest of the sentence. You're stretching really, really, really hard here to try to say like, oh, equivocate is a better choice. No. Because in that case, if that's what you want to say, you could say that you could almost use equivocate in every place you use equate, if that's how you want to say it, right? Like, you're equating murder with self-defense? How could you do that? Like, well, you're equivocating murder with self-defense? Well, you kind of are, because you're making one thing sound not as bad as the other. That's just not, yeah.
And not delineating them enough. So
the burning bush.
I don't need to know exactly what happened. When they suddenly say to you, but do you think it really happened?
The point of what Peterson is doing is to introduce ambiguity, I think. Yes, and he's introducing ambiguity by equating a physical and a non-physical thing. That's what's happening. Yes.
Well, what the hell does that mean?
You must know that what they mean is what I was talking about a second ago, which is that sort of...
What? Okay, so fine. So it's easy just to turn this around. It's like, okay, what exactly happened in your historical account when Moses encountered the burning bush?
I don't need to know exactly what happened. What I need to know is...
I'm not asking you specifically or attacking you for that.
What I need to know is that if I sort of went to the Egyptian desert at sort of the time that the story is alleged to have taken place in history, would I see a mass movement of Israelites from Egypt into the Promised Land? Would I see people with feet walking through the desert, leaving footprints?
Well, let's take it apart rationally. So,
oh my God. Alex just asking, like, materially, what do we see? Like, what is the material, physical reality of what we see?
Also understand that when someone's asking that, and like, even if you don't like the question, you must understand what someone's asking.
Oh yes, well, I understand many of the things that they're doing simultaneously.
You must also...
How did it feels like somebody introduced Peterson to philosophy like last week, except for years and years, where every single question, like, did you go to the store yesterday? Well, now that's an interesting question. Yesterday? Well, what do you mean by that? I mean Monday, Tuesday. Today's Tuesday, Monday. Well, it's an interesting question if you really think about it. And when I go somewhere, well, go where? Well, I was in Florida and I was still in Florida when I went there. Have I really moved at all? Or do you mean is my position in the universe changing? Did you physically walk to the fucking store and go inside and buy shit. Now, when you say buy, some people, consider the stealing of profits from workers to be theft. And can I truly buy with something that I've never actually earned on my own before? Is it not a form of theft to transfer the theft from the worker to the store owner when I purchase things with dollars earned? It just feels like his answer to everything is just the most ridiculous. Can you not contextually understand a single thing that's ever being said to you? Jesus.
Need to know.
I'm not asking you specifically or attacking you for that.
What I need to know is that if I...
we're not engaging in there are ways that you could meaningfully interrogate presuppositions. Oof. There are ways that you could meaningfully interrogate presuppositions to have an interesting conversation, right? An 18-year-old tells you, I just got out of a 3-year relationship. I feel like my life is over. I think I was in love with her. Well, hold on. You're 18. What do you mean when you say in love, right? It might be good to actually introspect on that, right? You're young, how you feel about a particular, right? There are times when it's good to critically analyze the foundations of either concepts or even words that we're using, where it makes sense. Like, okay, yeah, right? But there are other times where it's just pretentious, and the purpose isn't the purpose for interrogating concepts should be to gain insight, not to obfuscate, right? The purpose should be that when I'm asking these questions, it's because it's actually getting us more insight into the question itself, not like I'm asking the question just to obfuscate and make the conversation meaningless. It's
sort of went to the Egyptian desert at sort of the time that the story is alleged to have taken place in history, would I see a mass movement of Israelites from Egypt into the Promised Land? Would I see people with feet walking through the desert, leaving footprints?
Well, let's take it apart rationally. So,
but you also understand that when someone's asking that, and even if you don't like the question, you must understand what someone's asking.
Oh yes, I understand many of the things that they're doing simultaneously.
You must also understand that when you then say it's still happening, people just go, "What are you talking about?" Yeah,
well, I would say that's not my problem.
But
now, when he says that's not my problem, it is your problem. Remember, the whole point of language is to make things understood to other minds. Otherwise, there's literally no point in language. You're uttering meaningless sounds, right? If I walk around and go, blah, 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 right? And I'm just saying things all day that mean nothing. I'm invoking the concept of a private language. Oh, well, what do these things mean? Nothing. Well, I mean, they mean things to me, but not to anybody else. Okay, then it's meaningless. But in that case, why bother speaking to anybody else at all? The only reason we speak is to, invoke thoughts or evoke thoughts from other people's minds, right? I utter words so that other people think of things in response to what I'm saying. That's the only reason. If nobody can understand what you're saying, then you're engaging in a fruitless, pointless, absurd, exercise of just uttering meaninglessness.
It becomes a problem when you understand that someone's asking a quite banal historical question.
Yeah, but you don't get to do that.
But why not?
Because the stories that you're dealing with aren't banal.
I agree, but
so you can't reduce them to something banal, even if it's what would you call it? Even if it's reassuring. This actually happened. Then what do you do with the burning bush? So this actually happened.
One comparison I would make is between this and talking about fiction.
Can somebody? I don't know what he means when he says that. When he says that the stories are banal.
So even if it's what would you call it? Even if it's reassuring. This actually happened. Then what do you do with the burning bush? So this actually happened.
One comparison I would make is.
I don't understand. Is there other definitions for this word? Repeated too often, overfamiliar through overuse. I don't know how that plugs in here at all, but okay.
Between this and talking about fiction more broadly, right?
Well, you got it right earlier. I would say you noted that the stories in the biblical library leap across genres.
Yes.
Right? Well, we know this because sometimes they're poetry and sometimes they're songs. Yeah, exactly. And so in any given story, there's going to be historical account plus mythological overlay. And, you have to be a discriminating reader to kind of see what's different. And you don't just get to say, well, all the mythological symbolism is historical reality. It's no, it's not.
But here's the thing, for example. So take a piece of trivial fiction like Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Right? We say okay, did that happen? Now,
oh, God. Peterson isn't going to give an answer to this question. He's going to say, well, I don't know. Did it? Did it happen? I mean, we see it on film. We can see the movie. We can watch it. So something happened.
I think that what you'd probably say is something like, well, I don't think the events literally occurred, but I think that they obviously get at something that's sort of perennially true about human nature.
Exactly.
And suppose I said,
right. So they happened. They existed as a pattern.
But there's a scene in Forrest Gump when I think he meets the president. Is it JFK at the time? I think he goes and meets John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
And so I said to you, well, is JFK that specific part of that story? Is it true that JFK was the president?
Right.
And you would probably just say, yeah. You wouldn't say anything more complicated. And even though the subject as a whole, is Forrest Gump true? Is Hamlet true? That's a complicated question.
Very.
But specifically, when I say, but interestingly, there's this.
I disagree. That's not a complicated question. No. If you take a collection of things and you're asked to make a conclusion about all those things, if only one like part of those things is false, I think you would say that it's not true, right? If I tell you a story that Barack Obama was the president of the United States and Barack Obama was a black man and Barack Obama had a wife and Barack Obama could fly with the lift produced by his massive arms, would you say that whole statement, would you say that statement is true? The answer would be no. That is not a true statement. No, absolutely not. Logically, right? Logic, capital L, whatever. Like logically, the statement is not true because there's some element here. You've incorporated too much into it and parts of it aren't true. So the whole statement itself can't possibly be true, right? But if you want to, but I mean, like when people talk about is Forrest Gump true, they're not asking if some smaller part of it is true. They're asking if the entirety of the thing is true. The answer would just be no. Now, if you want, you could have an interesting conversation about breaking things down to their elements and which parts are true and which parts aren't true, and what does it mean for something to be true here, right? Like if something happens in a film and it's shown on film and somebody asks, did that actually happen? Well, when they say that, what are they actually referring to? Are they referring to the thing on film? Well, of course that happened. It was recorded. Are they referring to the event that the thing on film refers to? Well, yeah, of course, it's referring to another event. Are they talking about did the actual event that it referred to happen in the exact way that it was shown on film, right? There's a more complicated way you can break down that in particular, but when you're talking about a macro level thing, you're incorporating a lot of other things. If anything isn't true, you would just say the thing itself is not, no? Like, that would be my...
Right.
And you would probably just say, yeah.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say anything more complicated. And even though the subject as a whole, like, is Forrest Gump true? Is Hamlet true? That's a complicated question.
Very.
But specifically, when I say, but interestingly, there's this little point I want to make in this broader discussion. Do you think that JFK was actually the president? You would say yes.
Why do you think it matters to people? Like, I don't know. These are ancient accounts.
Maybe that's the biggest problem. Maybe that's the biggest problem that you have with people who are asking these questions.
It is. Like, what point are you trying to make here?
So
the point is, I know what the point usually is the people who are asking the question believe that true unerringly means objectively happened in history, like the things that we're seeing right now happen.
Yep.
It's like, well, no. That's not.
The problem, interestingly enough, maybe is it almost feels like, I don't know if he does it almost feels like Jordan Peterson connects a moral truth. This is similar to the bubbles thing or whatever the fuck, where people are connecting things, premises with conclusions or whatever. It feels like Peterson, to some extent, connects like the moral value of whatever message he gets from a metaphor or allegory. He connects that to the underlying factual reality. So when somebody questions that factual reality, he thinks that they're necessarily discarding the moral message from the allegory or the metaphor. So when somebody says to Jordan Peterson, I don't actually think that Jews did exodus from Egypt. I don't think they did cross that. I don't think that happened. What Peterson is hearing and what he's emotionally feeling is, I don't believe in the moral story of Moses wandering the desert for days. I don't believe I don't believe in the morals of that story. I don't believe in the messaging of that story. I don't agree with your moral conclusions from that story. That's what he's hearing. So he has to fight on that premise one. He has to fight on that factual ground because he can't concede any of that. So instead he has to obfuscate. Well, when you say Jews in the desert, well, what desert, what Jews, what time period? When you say happened, what do you mean by happened? And when you say evidence, he has to fight on every single thing because his moral truths that he's fighting for here are like directly connected to whatever underlying metaphysical understanding he has of the events, right? Where metaphysical is like how we define what things, what are like the materially real things in the world or whatever. Like these things have to be real events because he's deriving moral truth from them. And if the things, like it can't be stories. Like Jordan Peterson seems like a guy who we're like, the Garden of Eden, well, that's just like an allegory or that's just a metaphor. He's like, no, hold on. That story needs to be real. If it's not real, that like metaphors, I guess like ironically enough, it's like he's destroying allegory in his mind. Like allegory, nothing can be allegorical. It can't be real. There can't be, or I'm sorry, it has to be real. There can't be metaphors. They have to be real. You can't tell stories. They have to be real things. They all have to be real because if they're not real, somehow the moral meaning is lost or something, I guess. I don't know. That's what it feels like he's saying, which is absurd.
Is that I find puzzling, for example, about Dawkins, because Dawkins formulated the idea of meme, which is, by the way, the same idea as archetype. It's exactly the same idea, except he just stopped. It's like, okay, there are memes. They're selected for. Okay, selected on what basis exactly? Does that mean there's a hierarchy of memes? Are the memes that are conserved more likely to be what would you say, viable organisms? And if they're viable organisms, are they microcosms?
This is really interesting in terms of the survivability, because there's a point, I've spoken to Richard Dawkins, well, a number of times, but twice on my podcast.
It's not interesting. Nothing Jordan Peterson says is interesting. It's just like, it's needlessly pedantic, like quibbling and equivocating and just like the most pointless. I just, there's nothing of value. I would be curious if there's any conversation of value where Peterson is actually interrogating these beliefs ever. Like, it seems like Peterson feels like a horoscope that you'd read in Vogue, where you read something and it's vague enough that you can basically interpret whatever you want out of it and then feel like it's really speaking to you. That's what Peterson feels like when he speaks like this.
Spoken to Richard Dawkins, well, a number of times, but twice on my podcast. And the second time, somebody pointed out to me that there might be a point of agreement between you two that has been overlooked, which is that, I don't know if you've ever come across the evolutionary argument against naturalism, or the...
Do you think that Alex has to say this, or Peterson just shuts down and makes it a short discussion? Oh, yeah, I'm sure Alex is trying to be polite because he doesn't want to, like, have Peterson blacklist or anything.
The argument from reason, the idea that if you're a materialist, you can't trust your reasonable faculties. So Alvin Plantinga formulated this very well, very, very geniusly, I think, in saying that if you believe that evolution by natural selection happens materially, what does natural selection select for? Survivability. So if you're a materialist, that means that the very rational faculty that you're using right now evolves not to be sensitive to truth, but to survivability.
True. There could be entire parts or aspects of the universe that you're not capable of perceiving because those particular things don't actually help you navigate the world in a survivable way, right? This is the whole, what did I call this stupid shit? Humans aren't truth-seeking machines. We're not. Our bodies aren't built to seek truth. Our bodies are built to survive and pass on our genes. Now, generally speaking, truth and survivability seem to line up pretty well. If you think a thing is true, it gives you the ability to navigate the environment in a more favorable way. But there could be more abstract thought where that begins to diverge, right? Where sugar tastes good, but it's not good for you because it's not like an immediate punishment or whatever to it. So that like the consequence of believing in an untrue thing are more separated. But yeah.
Yes, that's
right.
And
if that's the case, well,
Definitely.
Why do you believe in the truth of evolution? Well, because you've been rationally convinced of it. But the thing that you've just assented to, the belief itself has just undercut the process by which you get that belief.
There's a whole...
I don't think that's necessarily true, but I guess it could be depending on how fundamental you go. If you've been convinced that a particular thing is true, but your entire idea of truth is really just an evolved mechanism for passing on your genes, how can you theoretically... I guess if you go fundamental enough, yeah, technically every single part of your epistemic grounding is undermined by survivability, because there could be some foundational epistemic belief that would be contrary to your surviving, and then that would be, but you'd never be able to perceive it because naturalistically your body isn't evolved to, theoretically, I guess. But who cares? That, I feel like at that level you're getting into like ultimate skepticism. You've essentially arrived there. Fuck, no one cares. Fuck that.
The New England pragmatists figured this out in like 1880.
Yeah, no, I think this is fascinating. I think it really is just
It is.
It's exciting. It's novel.
That's for sure. That's for sure. It's actually a point where Darwin and Newton do not come together.
How do you mean?
Well, the Darwinian definition of true and the Newtonian definition are not the same thing.
What is a Newtonian definition of true? I don't even know what that means. Newtonian definition of truth. Did Newton do a lot of like epistemology? I have no fucking idea. Darwinian truth and Newtonian truth. Newtonianism. Oh, the wiki. Actually, hold on. We should be doing Newton's philosophy. True. I don't think this is getting us anywhere. He probably just means Newtonian is like deductive truth and Darwinian is inductive truth. He means empiricism. Okay. All right. Okay. His broad conception of the universe is being governed by rational and understandable laws laid the foundation for many strands of Enlightenment thought. Okay.
Come together.
How do you mean?
Well, the Darwinian definition of true and the Newtonian definition of true are not the same thing.
Here's the thing. You had a conversation with Sam Harris. You've had a number, but one of them, I don't think it was a live event. I think it was before that. You're talking about truth.
Yeah,
and
you're very awkward. Second talk I had with him, I was extremely ill.
It was awkward to listen to because it felt very much like, and I remember at the time thinking, what is this Jordan Peterson talking about? Like truth is like Darwinian. Truth is about like survivability. What do you mean truth is
true? The way an arrow flies.
Yeah, right. And now I asked Richard Dawkins about the evolutionary argument against naturalism. Yeah. I said, well, how can you know that what you believe is true? And he said, because believing true things makes me more likely to survive.
Hey, boy.
That's who said that? That's a naive assumption because you can't really know, because the whole point of this line of inquiry is to invoke ultimate skepticism. So an ultimate skeptic is somebody who can always say why a million times, right? Oh, well, I believe that things are true because I can perceive them with my senses. Why? Why do you trust your senses? Well, I mean, because I don't know, because I use them. There's no other way for me to communicate with the outside world. Why do you communicate with the outside world? How do you even know you are? Well, I don't know. I mean, I think, therefore, I am. Like, if I don't know, okay, well, how do you know it's not a demon revealing the universe to you? Okay, well, I don't know. Well, why? Like, this is like ultimate skepticism is you can undermine theoretically every single position by infinitely inquiring and looking for some solid, like, unshakable foundation to some, system of epistemology, which is probably impossible as humans. So there's like a few assumptions you've got to make to get shit off the ground. But I mean, it's a fruitless endeavor because nobody wants to talk to an ultimate skeptic. There's no point, right?
He said, because believing true things makes me more likely to survive.
Hey, watch where you go with that.
I didn't catch it at the time, but I thought to myself afterwards, it was one of my commenters on Patreon actually had mentioned, he was listening to Richard, and I said, but okay, maybe, but sometimes it's at least possible that something that's false helps you to survive. The rustling in the bushes, believing that that's a lion every time or tiger, even if it's not, that helps you to survive, because that one time that it is, you're still going to run away, and it costs you nothing to run away when it's not a tiger. So believing it's a tiger, even when it's not, is going to help you to survive.
That's why we have a negativity bias.
Yeah, and Dawkins, of course there are some circumstances where believing something false could be beneficial to survival. And I said, well, how do you know that 2 + 2 = 4 is not one of those? And it seemed as though he was just saying that believing that would not be advantageous to our survival, which might well be true. But if that's the case, then suddenly I'm listening to...
If that's the case, you have no way of perceiving that, right? Because it's an ultimately skeptical position. You're saying that the subjectivity of the observer can never perceive a thing as being absolutely true or not, because what you think is true is just stuff that helps you survive. You're undercutting your entire foundation of understanding the world.
What you're saying about truth being more sort of Darwinian and related to survivability, and I think maybe you two would agree there. And I think, well, why is it that when you sit down with Richard Dawkins, you find it difficult to have a conversation with each other?
And he comes at it from this completely different perspective to, I imagine, the perspective that most of your previous Christian opponents, not that Jordan Peterson is strictly a Christian, have come at it from. And I wonder what you make of him and his approach.
I enormously respect his courage in standing up to the Canadian laws about free speech. So I want to just get that out of the way first. I hugely respect that and value him for that reason. When he talks about religion, I think it's bullshit. I think that he doesn't make any sense at all. I think he's impressing people by using language they don't understand, rather like Deepak Chopra, where people think, oh, it must be terribly profound because I can't understand it, which is not something I can respect. Michael Shermer told me that he tried to pin him down and said, do you actually believe that Jesus was born of a virgin? And Jordan Peterson said, it would take me at least 2 days to answer that. So Michael said more or less, well, how about one sentence or one word? No. And that's how I feel about that. All the stuff about Jungian archetypes, and not that I would be skeptical about that, but constantly dragging them in.
And
well, I think it's partly because we don't know each other very well.
That's
right. And also, there are things he knows that I don't know, and there are things I know that he doesn't know. Now, I would say in my defense that what would you say? I'm more aware of the things he knows that I don't know than he is of the things I know that he doesn't know. Right. So, for example, as far as I can tell, Dawkins doesn't know anything about the Jungian tradition of literary interpretation, and that actually, if you're going to talk about religion, that's actually a fatal flaw. Right. So, and he's called me, for example, drunk on symbols. It's like, well, the imagination is a biological function, and it has a structure and a purpose, and it has its own logos, its own intelligible order. And
yeah, but I mean, people can also be schizophrenic. Like, what this?
And if you're not aware of that order, that doesn't make me drunk on symbols. It just means you don't know what you're talking about.
Now, that frustration that you appeal to there, when you hear Richard Dawkins I think Terry Eagleton said that listening to Dawkins on theology is like listening to somebody write a book about biology whose only knowledge of the subject is having once read the Great British Book of Birds. And okay, fair enough.
But that actually turns out to be a real problem. And it's a problem with regards even to the meme idea, because you don't have to extend Dawkins' work very far to understand that religious stories are memes.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a hierarchy of memes, and some of them are very functional.
But then here's the thing, like that frustration that you're sort of throwing in that direction, I think people throw towards you when you say, well, religion, you don't have to look very far to see that religion is a meme. Well, without further clarification, and of course there's going to be it, you can understand why to somebody first listening, that sounds almost atheistic, or religion is a meme. No,
right?
Religion is not a true historical account of, the history of the universe.
It's not a true historical account.
It's a meme. Now, when you say that the resurrection of Jesus.
Well, what does it mean historically that the Spirit of God brooded upon the primordial waters?
5 minutes.
Like, what does that mean historically? No one. Oh, then what do you do with the burning bush?
So
this actually happened.
One comparison it's something that's sort of perennially true about human nature.
Right, exactly. That's right. So they happened. They existed as a pattern.
But there's a scene in Forrest Gump when I think he meets the president. Is it JFK at the time? I think he goes and meets John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
And so I said to you, well, is JFK like that?
The setup to the Exodus story that strike me as very, very plausible historically. So, for example.
Okay.
Some of it is, but
for a Christian, when asking that, it's probably because for them they have an understanding of
ancient accounts.
Maybe that's the biggest problem. Maybe that's the biggest problem that you have with people who are asking these questions.
It is. And like, what point are you trying to make here? So the point is, I know what the point usually is the people who are asking the question believe that true in unerringly means.
I also hate it when people do this, and I hate watching people do this. It happened on the WIC panel. Every time I see this, it drives me crazy. When people are trying to set up an argument, so they ask you a question, but instead of answering honestly, you're trying to head off the argument, right? So like somebody says, I should be able to kill somebody. I should be able to kill somebody if they are impeding, my path in life. And then somebody asks you, okay, well, let's say theoretically, you know how sometimes people can walk across an interstate, and the person's like, no, that never happens. And it's like, wait, what? Okay, well, like, what if they're walking across the street, right? Would you, sometimes you drive and you've got to take your kid to school to make sure your kid's to school on time, right? No, my kid takes the school bus. Okay. Okay, what if you there's like an emergency or a hospital? I would call an ambulance. Like, okay. Like, you can tell they're already trying to head off where they think the argument is going, so they don't even engage with any of they're just trying to, like, because they know that you're trying to trap them. They feel that you're trying to trap them, so they want that. God, I hate that. It drives me absolutely fucking insane when people won't, like, even start to go down a road with you. Oh, God.
Objectively happened in history, like the things that we're seeing right now happen.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, that's not what those stories are like.
For me,
some of it is, but
for a Christian, when asking that, it's probably because for them they have an understanding of Christianity that requires believing in that kind of truth. For me, and the reason why I hope that, like, me asking these questions will be less frustrating to you is because I have no desire for that. I don't care about that. I'm genuinely just interested in what you think.
Yeah,
and so my desire to know whether you think Exodus historically happened goes no further than a point of interest about your beliefs.
Well, so there's.
Well, is it going to engage with that? We have 2 minutes after that. Is it going to actually? So Alex saying, I just want to know. I'm just looking for the fact of the matter here. Do you materially think there was a Jewish exodus from Egypt? That's all I want to know. That fact of the matter. That's all I want to know. I'm not trying to make a moral judgment. So Alex is trying to separate out all the other shit. I just want to know that one thing. Let's see what he says to this.
You think Exodus historically happened goes no further than a point of interest about your beliefs.
Well, so there's elements of especially the setup to the Exodus story that strike me as very, very plausible historically. So
that is not at all answering the question. That's equivocation right there, by the way. Do you think that this thing happened? The start of it, there are things that strike me as plausible. What the fuck are you saying? Do you think it happened, or do you think it didn't happen? Now you're going into like a whole thought process that you must have done a long time ago to arrive at the conclusion if you think it happened or didn't happen. Just tell me if you think it happened or didn't happen. But maybe he's like, maybe he'll talk through his whole answer, to be fair. I'm kind of cutting him off.
For example, the Jews, before the Pharaoh of that time, were under the guidance and protection of Joseph and the previous Pharaoh. And they regarded...
This topic is the entire 2-hour conversation? Holy fuck, kill me. Where do you rank Alex compared to other commentators / philosophy influencers? I don't know. I don't know enough philosophy to formally debunk anybody. I don't think I've ever heard Alex say anything dumb before, though. I feel like most of what he says is pretty agreeable. But for whatever that counts. But
the Israelites as benefactors, because Joseph had helped save the kingdom, and his people were welcome. But that was forgotten. And so the new Pharaoh and the new Egyptians regard the appallingly successful Jews as destructive interlopers, and they make them slaves. It's like, well, can you believe that? It happens all the time. Sure. It's happening right now. So it's
like this thought process. I say Jungian, but I really don't even know anything about Jung. I only know what I have absorbed from Peterson's whatever of him, so I don't know what the fuck. But it's interesting here that like the thought process that Peterson gives is this is the thought process of a crazy person. But basically, well, I've seen a pattern. There's a pattern that plays out here where one side wants to do something bad to the other side for reasons that are understandable. And then there's some Platonic universal form of this that is true and real. So, you know, if I give him any story that fits with this universal definition or this universal concept that he's identified, he should readily believe any story like that. So if I come up to him and I say, hey, did you know that in the year 1750, Kurdish people were so successful that the Turkish Ottomans tried to suppress and destroy that society? Then Peterson's answer, like following from this logic, is, well, you know, wouldn't that be the case? A successful people trying to be destroyed, minority trying to be destroyed by an oppressive regime? That's totally surprising. And leftism, right? Like that, like this is, it's not a good way to factually or materially understand anything. There is no material understanding here. He's taking like concepts or stories, and then he's trying to project. It's like one of the most, it's one of the biggest follies of like human irrationality is to do this. But what, I don't know.
Slaves. It's like, well, can you believe that? It happens all the time. Sure. It's happening right now. So it's very plausible.
In this particular case, saying it's very plausible. It's like saying something like, well, yeah.
Like that doesn't speak to the plausibility of that at all. No, that's not plausible, right? Yesterday, my parents dropped dead. Well, you know, I've heard this happens before. You know, this happened to somebody. That's very plausible. Like, no, what? Just because a thing has happened in the past, or just because a narrative or a particular story or particular things doesn't mean that it's plausible that it, unless your standard for plausibility here is just like conceivably possible.
All the time. Sure. It's happening right now. So it's very plausible.
In this particular case, saying it's very plausible. It's like saying something like, well, yeah, it could have happened. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Which is nothing.
Well, I don't know.
So when
you don't know, then why? Then are you making any? Do you have any truth claims whatsoever that you would be willing to make about any of these events, or are you completely? You know, in the dark or agnostic or like, well, I don't know, maybe it did, maybe it didn't? Clearly, that's not the case, right? Obviously, that's not the case. It seems like he's staked out a pretty hard position on the fact that it did happen. That's what it feels like, at least to me, intuitively. Emotionally, that's what it feels like.
In this particular case, saying it's very plausible. It's like saying something like, well, yeah, it could have happened. I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
So when
I don't think anybody knows.
So when somebody asks, did the Exodus really happen? That word "really," when they say,
yeah, if I just, really is the crux.
If I said, did the
it's not a crux. Really is obviously referring to something like material or physical. It's not a crux at all. It should be elucidating. Like it should be an obvious thing. It's obviously they're asking about a material fact, right?
The Exodus really happened. That word "really," when they say,
yeah, if I just really is the crux.
If I said, did the Exodus?
Why do you think he's so reluctant to take a position? Probably because he knows it's bullshit, but he feels like it undermines some other moral message, so he just pretends to. That's why I'm saying, like, good introspection or good interrogation of beliefs should yield some level of insight, but instead for Peterson, it's exclusively used as a tool to obfuscate, right? Now, I say that a little bit unfairly because it's possible that at the end of this long conversation, he wraps all of this together in some 20 or 30 minute back and forth where he's like, well, because I said this is what I mean by this, and that's how I have an understanding of this, blah, blah, blah. I seriously doubt it, though, because I don't think I've ever seen her do that ever in my entire life, but...
Somebody asks, did the Exodus really happen? That word "really," when they say,
yeah, if I just really is the crux.
If I said, did the Exodus happen? And I'd understand why you would then say, well, you've got to understand what kind of story this is. Fine.
Yes.
But then if somebody says, yeah, but did it really happen?
Well, which parts of it?
Even if they're not expressing it very well, like what they're getting at there is they're trying to emphasize the historicity. They're trying to say, yeah, but did it historically happen? Probably is what they mean by the word "really" there.
Right, but the thing is, it speaks of their. See, they have a problem. Is that Christians who ask that have a metaphysics that's not Christian.
A metaphysics that's not Christian. You're implying that event then could have never happened. When you talk about metaphysics, you're only talking about like the nature of like physical things in reality, or like the nature of things in reality, right? Most Christians have a metaphysics that for the most part is going to map on identically to most humans generally. Like there's going to be some difference in maybe their understandings of like what a soul is, or their understandings of what things that like are at the beginning of time, like the Big Bang or stuff like that. Unless you're talking about like, you know, Christians that are 6,000-year-old young Earth creationists or whatever. But generally, the metaphysics of Christians and non-Christians is going to line up like fairly closely. Maybe transubstantiation for Catholics is a bit different, but like these are like they're pretty niche things. Where's the transcript?
Let me compare trolley to a different kind of case. This case.
Oh, 7 minutes ago, fresh mic clip.
This is called hospital. So imagine that you were a surgeon You're not on a troll.
Chad, the reason why I can pre-watch this shit without ever watching these videos is because I took Philosophy 101 and I got an A. I'm not Destiny, okay? I didn't learn my philosophy from Wikipedia. I took philosophy classes. So
is there even a class called Philosophy 101? What would it be? Is that like a historical review of what? I have no idea. I didn't think Philosophy 101. Maybe there is. Phil 101.
I know what the philosophy professor is going to say because I read the fucking books and I did the fucking homework.
How much homework and studying? What are you learning in Philosophy 101? I feel like you're probably learning like a table of contents of philosophy. Like, what do you... This course introduces students to the foundational theories and methods of philosophical analysis, emphasizing critical examination of some fundamental principles and problems of philosophy, with examples from the major areas of philosophy, metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Yeah, that was, my guy's gonna be like, oh, we're gonna learn about the difference of what is metaphysics, what is epistemology, and what is ethics, and then like, who are a couple of really famous people? Like, that's probably about as deep as you go. That'd be my guess, but... And not really. There's a lot of reading and you go deep, but it all depends on how much you study. Without even having ever taken that class, I know you're full of shit. The f*** out of here. No shot, bro. I feel like I talked to philosophy graduates who are retarded. There's no shot that in an intro to philosophy class, you're getting some ultra deep understandings of like, oh yeah, like we had a huge debate over justified true belief and oh yeah, no shot. The f*** out of here. It's probably the lightest touch review ever, okay? It's a complete waste of time. I didn't say it was a complete waste of time. I seriously doubt you're getting ultra deep into fucking... Okay, stop. Don't trigger me. What am I looking for? Christians, physics. I'm starting at this point. I'm gonna hate myself. I need to go work and do shit. That's why.
Christians who ask that have a metaphysics that's not Christian. Mm-hmm. So it's a non-starter, the question. It's like, you're asking me the question a materialist atheist would ask. And you want me to give you an answer that bolsters...
Like, just because you're a materialist versus like a dualist or you believe in some other metaphysics doesn't mean you don't believe in anything material. Like, that's not like, oh, well, I'm Christian, so I don't believe that wood is real or something. Like, just because you aren't strictly a materialist doesn't mean that everything becomes immaterial. Like,
is your faith, but the presumptions of your question are Enlightenment atheistic. So it's like, I don't know how to play that game.
So do you think that to be a Christian...
Really? You don't know how to...
believe
do you believe that...
in historicity of the Exodus or the resurrection of Jesus?
Oh, nice. Oh, this is laggy as fuck now. Why? 44, 24. Do I need to root?
Well, I think those are separate issues, actually.
Okay, yeah, that's probably right.
An answer that bolsters your faith, but the presumptions of your question are Enlightenment atheistic. So it's like, I don't know how to play that game.
So do you think that to be a Christian, you don't need to believe in the historicity of the Exodus or the resurrection of Jesus, for example?
Well, I think those are separate issues, actually.
Oh my God. Holy fucking shit. Does he ever answer a single fucking question in this entire interview?
Okay, yeah, that's probably right as well. And interesting, you know, I spent last night, it's a bit of a time delay, so it feels like longer, but last night I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. I said, you know, I'm speaking to Jordan Peterson tomorrow. I was thinking, how can I prepare for this? And we ended up, with my friend Sheehan's name, we ended up having a conversation about whether Hamlet is a real person, right? And that was probably better preparation than anything else I could have done.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So take, if somebody asks, you know, was Hamlet a real person? Sort of naively, I say, have you heard the story of Hamlet? Oh no, is that a real person? I would say no. However, there is a sense in which, and I'm trying to understand what you're saying here. There is a sense in which there are a lot of characters, infinitely many characters that Shakespeare never wrote about. Yeah. Right? Those characters seem to exist less than Hamlet does. Yeah. Even if Hamlet exists less than Jordan Peterson and Alex O'Connor do in the
Hamlet might exist more
than me and you.
Well, okay. One of the things you pointed to in the analysis that you did in the talk I had with Jonathan Pajot is my somewhat tongue-in-cheek comment that God is the ultimate fictional character.
Yes.
Right, which I think is a hilarious slide, by the way.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I think I misunderstood. Now that I've watching that back, that's the thing I say. I think I might have misunderstood. Maybe that's what you're...
Deep is not the right word, I apologize, but I mean the topics covered are not easy. Like, it's a tough course is my point. Look at our syllabus. Aim of the course. In this course, we will examine, Intro to Philosophy. Some of the central topics in philosophy by means of a study, contemporary and historical philosophical texts. In this course, we will examine some of the central topics in philosophy by means of a study, contemporary and historical philosophical texts. In this course, we will examine some of the central topics in philosophy by means of a study, contemporary and historical philosophy. Okay. I'm just stroking out. Where is the of? There should be an of here, right? We will focus on questions such as the following. Can we prove that God exists? How do we know our own mind, and in what way can we know the world that lies outside our mind? How is the mind different from the body? Am I the same thing as my mind? Is the will free or subject to necessity or fate? Can we discover through reason a principle of morality and an account of happiness and the good life? Our questions thereby touch on the main branches of philosophy: metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. This guy got this from Google. This is the first result for Phil 101 syllabus. Oh, did he? Learning outcomes. Students successfully completing this course will be able to identify the principal branches of philosophy, articulate the diverse philosophical views of multiple historical and contemporary figures in philosophy in each of these branches, interpret and reconstruct the arguments in challenging philosophical texts, evaluate these arguments critically, synthesize textual interpretation and argument evaluation in clear, precise, and well-organized written expression. The required text is The Norton Introduction to Philosophy. 1,312-page book. What the fuck? Put the pen down, little bro. I mean, it just seems like, yeah, it's like an intro course. I don't know why I don't know what I'm even arguing with you about. I'm just saying that, like, you're not taking an intro course like this and having like a super strong, in-depth understanding of any of these topics. You're getting like a taste of. My guess is going to be that this book you're working on one text, so you're not reading any full books. This text probably has excerpts from some of the most popular positions, from some of the most popular historical philosophers, and then you're just like touching on and then understanding like each of these three branches of philosophy. That's probably what you're doing. It's not bad. I'm not trying to shit on like intro to philosophy class. I'm just saying I don't think you would ever scream like, "Well, I have a really good understanding that I took an intro to philosophy class." You would sound like a fucking retard. Okay, that's all I'm saying. It says the books, read the contents down there. Where? All of these things are sourced out of the books themselves, out of that one book, right? This one book probably has excerpts, right? So like Kant was obviously being implied in the intro when it was saying, can we discover through reason a principle of morality and an account of happiness and the good life? Could you imagine that? Discovering morals from reason? Wow. What a transcendental idea. Oh my God. Like, yeah. I'm not shitting on it. I'm sorry. The impression or the means wasn't to shit on this. I'm just saying that like you would never come out of this intro course and feel like confidently like screaming that you've taken a class in philosophy and you can, yeah. Not to be too charitable to Mike, wasn't his claim that because he had a surface level knowledge of actual philosophical education and you're just a wiki retard with no education? Yeah, but the thing is that if you knew all of the wiki on philosophy, you would know extensively more information than somebody that would take an intro to philosophy course. So it's a stupid criticism, number one. And it's dumb on several levels. One is because an intro to philosophy course isn't going to have much information. Two is that the standard Wikipedia is going to have way more information than an intro course. Three is that it shows that he's probably overestimating what you would learn in an intro to philosophy course. And four, if you really want to do anything about reading about philosophy online and you're trying to read a wiki, you wouldn't even read the wiki. You would read you'd read the wiki that Stanford manages for philosophy. This plato.stanford.edu is going to have like way, way, way better and more in-depth information. And it's going to be more critically vetted and organized than like just the ordinary Wikipedia. So just his statement is stupid on like at least 4 different levels. But okay, I'm just saying he's a dumb fuck. That's all I'm saying.
You're about to tell me I should interrupt.
Let's walk through that. Yeah, because people see, and this is part of this underlying materialist, atheist, enlightenment ethos. People think that fiction and fact are opposites. It's like no, they're not. Okay. Not at all. Okay, so let's use an analogy to begin with. What's more real, things or numbers? Mm-hmm. Okay, now I'm not going to make a case for either of those positions. I'm just saying that's an actual question. Yeah. You talk to mathematicians, they think, well, numbers are way more real than things. Things are evanescent. They disappear. They flash in and out of existence. Numbers are permanent. Yeah. And then you could think about
that's an intense simplification of like arguments of like mathematical realism versus anti-realism or anything else. But like, does he say anything of substance ever? I'm listening for like 4 more minutes of this. Get me the fuck out of here.
Biologically, it's like, well, how useful is numeracy to survival? Yeah. Like very. Right? When you become numerate, you're powerful in a way that the mere grip you have on the individual facts doesn't afford at all. So there are forms of abstraction that are clearly more real than the things from which they're abstracted, or at least as real. I would say more real because they're so powerful. Well, fiction is an abstraction, right? And so did Hamlet exist? It's like Hamlet is the pattern
Oh, so he's okay. Well, at least we were able to guess his entire fucking mind state, right? That these abstractions, I call them Platonic universals. I don't know if this is the same thing as like a universal form, because I didn't study any form of philosophy because I don't know all about any of this. But it sounds like he's alluding to the fact that this universal form and understanding this universal form is necessarily a true like fact of the universe and gives you more power over the universe than understanding any particularized thing or whatever, because it applies evenly everywhere. But there's a whole bunch of issues with looking at it this simplistically, but
of character that existed in multiple people over a very long period of time. And so Hamlet is an abstraction, like Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment. Did Raskolnikov exist?
Massive cope. A student in this course reads about 20 pages sourced from the most influential works and authors of philosophy, a higher quality education than online summaries. Listen, bro, I love you. I'm giving you the big thumbs up. I'm assuming that that's a troll. I'm going to assume that that's a troll statement because you say 20 pages. I'm telling you right now that if you go and read like 5 pages from Kant and you pretend that you've understood a single thing that you read, you're just utterly clueless. I'm sorry, but in philosophy, you have to do so much background work to even understand what a particular philosopher, depending on what you're looking at. Like you could probably go through like something the Plato or the Socratic are they dialectics? What the are they called? Like the stories where the people are arguing back and forth or whatever, dialogues or whatever. Like you can go through like a couple of these because they're dealing with very, very basic things. Very, very, very basic things that like any human can understand. Like very basic allegory things or very basic things about like metaphysics or whatever. But the idea that you're like reading, like 10 or 20 pages and you're getting a deep understanding of like a more, like a philosopher that's written more in depth than things is just never happening.
It's like Raskolnikov existed in the soul of every Russian from like 1850 to 1990,
sure.
Right? And so is it real? It's like, it's hyper real.
Yeah.
Fiction is hyper real.
It's a meta truth, as you put
right,
it
exactly.
in that podcast.
Now, is that real? Well,
when someone says, if they've listened to what you've just said and understood it, then if they still ask the question, but is it real?
Is it real? It's like, it's hyper real over a very long period of time. And so Hamlet is an abstraction, like Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment. Did Raskolnikov exist? It's like Raskolnikov existed in the soul of every Russian from like 1850 to 1990,
sure.
Right? And so is it real? It's like, it's hyper real.
Yeah.
The way to break Peterson out is so easy. It would be so easy to break Peterson out of this for in the entirety of his entire life. And that would be to take all of these ideas and turn them into a brain chip and just implant them into every single person that he interacts with for 2 days. And then he would never do this again. He walks into a restaurant. Oh, I'd like to order a coffee. And it's like, oh, well, a coffee. Well, what do you mean when you say coffee? Oh, that's a good one. I see you've seen my videos. No, sir, I'm really asking. What do you mean when you say coffee? Are you referring to the bean itself? Are you referring to a brown liquid that you assume is coffee? Have you ever actually tested any of it to be coffee before? What if what one man referred to as coffee was different than what another man referred to as, like if every single person is like, I've got to be there at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Okay, I need a ride to get there at 9 a.m. A ride? Well, when you say a ride, that could refer to so many different things. And when you say 9 a.m., from whose perspective? From what time? Has 9 a.m. always meant the same thing historically? Like, I guarantee you that like in 2 days, he would be like, okay, shut the up. You know what the I mean when I say this. Holy shit. Nobody speaks and acts like this. Also, if you want to be, I'm being incredibly charitable, by the way, when I'm asserting these things, because the reality is, and I feel pretty strong when I say this, Peterson's not actually engaging in any of this with some level of curiosity. He's just doing this to bad faith obfuscate away from things that he knows that he can't actually justify. Because notice how it's so hard to stake out a single claim for any of this, but you better be fucking damn sure that we know that 20% of the excess deaths in Europe were caused by the vaccine, right? Isn't it strange that a man who can't even answer the question of did the Exodus actually happen, or what does it mean to even ask that question, can resolutely tell you that climate change is fake, that the vaccines killed, however many people, and that lockdowns were ineffective to prevent the spread of disease? Wow, those are some actually incredibly strong claims that you're staking in multiple different arenas, and in climate, is climatology a word? In climate sciences, in epidemiology, in like social, health policy, like you have very strong claims in these areas. Like, how are you able to do that, right? And the answer is because, well, when he has an answer that he wants to give, he will suddenly stake a very strong claim if he feels like he can justify it. But if he feels like he can't meaningfully engage with it, then the goal is to obfuscate and equivocate over and over and over again until you've needled the subject to death, and nobody has any idea what you're even talking about. Yeah.
Fiction is hyper real.
It's a meta truth, as you put it in that podcast.
Now, is that real? Well,
when someone says, if they've listened to what you've just said and understood it, then if they still ask the question, but is it real? You must understand that what they mean is like did Alyona Ivanovna get hit in the head with an axe?
Right.
Like, yes, or did that happen?
Right.
And again, you could still resort saying, it happened in the heart of every Russian who's ever thought about
I would say no to that specific.
But no, right? No is the answer.
Yeah.
And so, and we can say no with confidence because we know that Dostoevsky sort of thought this up.
Yeah.
With something like, no, right? Like, yes, or did that happen?
Right.
And again, did Alyona Ivanovna get hit in the head with an axe?
Right.
Like, yes, or did that happen?
Right.
And again, you could still resort saying, it happened in the heart of every Russian.
I don't know what this is referring to. Some Russian bullshit. Okay.
Who's ever thought about
I would say no to that specific.
No, right? No is the answer. And so, and we can say no with confidence because we know that Dostoevsky sort of thought this up.
Yeah.
With something like,
when it comes to his stance on pronouns, holy shit, you better believe that he has a rock fucking solid foundation when it comes to like what pronoun you can call somebody, Oh, Crime and Punishment? Oh, I never read that book. Thank fucking God.
Walk through the desert. We can't as confidently say something like, no, that didn't happen. But we have to be more humble in saying something like, I don't know. But the comparison I made in this video, I put two.
Yeah, true. He will deconstruct literally every single facet of epistemology, meta-epistemology, of metaphysics, of ethics. Every single thing can be infinitely deconstructed. But when it comes to like the concept of gender, holy shit, now we've entered the most capital R real world one can even imagine. Like, my God.
Questions side by side. You were asked by Douglas Murray, did Raskolnikov exist? And you say, well, I think that the events literally didn't happen, but that kind of misses something, and there's something more to talk about. And then you're asked,
the pattern is extremely real.
Sure. Then you're asked about Cain and Abel. The story of Cain and Abel happened.
Yeah, that's
like famously, the question, did that happen? Begs the question. If you've got to consider, and you sort of, in a way that it seems strange to me, the ease with which you were able to say of Raskolnikov and Dostoevsky. Well, no, that didn't literally happen, of course, but you've got to understand that there's another sense in which we've got to talk about the truth of the story.
Well, the Cain and Abel story is quite complex because you could imagine easily that.
And now he's about to go ramble on this. I don't think Alex asked or cared. Like, now we're going to talk about all the metaphors and allegories present in Cain and Abel, even though it's obvious that Alex is trying to figure out if Peterson exists in the material world at all. What is he about to say here? Well, we can imagine that this actually happened in one sense, that this was a real story that truly did happen between people, but still represents something larger in reality. I don't know. He might go somewhere totally.
There was a fratricide at some point in the past that was of sufficient emotional magnitude.
Oh, fuck, based. I did pre-watch this video.
To have stories aggregate around it, to have an account aggregate around it. So it's easiest to presume that because why not? It's perfectly plausible that a primordial murder of that sort happened in the memory of that tribal people and was represented in that manner. Now, as the account in Iliad has done a very good job of pointing out how this develops too. You can think of Iliad's work on the mythologization of stories as an extension of Dawkins' idea of the meme, because Iliad discusses in great detail how an account mutates to, what would you say, to be maximally memorable across time. So it mutates. You can take there was a core that's true, let's say in a narrow historical sense, but the account mutates to be optimally adapted to the structure of memory that characterizes the human psyche.
And that comes out in the story, like the story of Cain and Abel.
Right, and you get a maximally memorable story. Now, that's a meme. Is it true? That's a hard question because, you see,
I think Cain and Abel probably belongs more on the sort of brooding over the face of the waters category than it does Exodus category, for example. Like, so I think with Cain and Abel,
there's very little detail in it that would make it a specific historical event, right? I mean, because it's two generic brothers and there's a generic murder. But it's interesting too, because even in the case of a specific fratricide, let's say, that actually happens in the world, well, there's all sorts of principalities involved in the background, right? So, for example, I spent a lot of time looking at Dylan Klebold's accounting of his mental state before shooting up the Columbine High School. Well, if you read that, it'll make your blood run cold. He's obviously possessed, whatever that means. Whatever that means.
Well, happy to accept the word possessed.
Well, look what he did.
Knowing, in part, don't take this the wrong way, knowing that I'm speaking with you. I'm not going to take that as literally as I would if I was speaking to.
Yeah, well, literally is a very hard thing in a circumstance like that.
Well, what do we mean when we say literally? How are we done with this yet? Okay, at 52:30, I'm done with this video. I think I already went a minute and a half over. Fuck me, dude.
Because Klebold invited something in, and it wasn't pleasant, and it had its way with him, right? And the results, although dreadful, were nowhere near as dreadful as he was hoping they would be, right? It's dark. And is that real? So what happened there? It's like, well, one way of describing it is that, a alienated young man shot up a high school. Another way of representing it, which may be more true, is that it was another, what would you say, punctuated episode of a cosmic drama that's been going on forever. And it isn't obvious to me at all which of those two accounts is more real.
Well, it depends on what specific questions being asked. For example, right now, suppose that you were a witness to this crime, and the police pull you into questioning as a witness.
Yeah.
And they say, we're trying.
Oh my God, hold on, wait. You're a witness to a crime. Oh boy, what does he say here?
Trying to gather information to try and catch the suspects. So suppose that there's no suicide involved. The suspects at large. They're trying to get your help. And they say, so Dr. Peterson, what happened? And you say, well, I think what happened was the continuation, of sort of a punctuation in the long paragraph of the cosmic drama that is our human existence. And the police sort of say,
that's not what we meant.
Okay, but come on, help me out here, man. And I think that's what people are doing with the registration.
Well, that's a level of analysis problem. So we went back, when we started this discussion.
Yes, it is a level of analysis. That's what he's getting at. That's what he's been getting at has this been the entire talk? Have they been doing this the entire time, or did this just start like 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, 40 minutes ago?
You talked about the infinite regress for purposes for writing an essay, right? So what are you doing when you're writing an essay? You're making horizontal and curved marks with a pen.
Sure.
Right, well, right. So, but there is a cosmic tree of events in every micro event, right? And when people, when they're looking for eyewitness testimony, they're asking you for something.
Why does Destiny Group in part, why does destroy a group in part mean when describing genocide prevention? That's just the language that's used in the crime of genocide. So usually when people say, if you're trying to destroy a group in whole or in part, you're invoking the language of the genocide crime there.
Something like the highest possible level.
Time's up. Hold on. I want to hear if he actually ever, what would he say to the fucking cops? Does he ever get here?
Of narrow resolution you can manage.
Yeah.
Right.
Ian McGilchrist just
that's right.
I just spoke with him, and unfortunately I think we lost about half the footage, so I'm not sure how much that'll be seen in the world, but he brought to my attention, I'm sure he said it was John Ruskin, who talked about having you see in the garden, you see like a square, and you think it's like a white square in the garden, and then you go a bit closer and you see it's actually a page, it's a book. And then you look a bit closer and you see it's got words on it. You have a microscope and you see actually it's got like ridges.
Yeah.
And then you go a bit closer and you actually see atoms bumping into each other. And you go a bit closer.
Philosophy talks are always like this, no? No, that is not true. No, they're not. There's a lot that you could, like, you can ask really interesting questions philosophically and then like have some sort of insight into your life, like meaningfully from these types of interrogations. I think it's worthwhile to pursue different types of conversations philosophically. This is not, though. Like, Peterson hasn't said a single thing of value at this point, I don't believe. At least that I've heard in this interview. I mean, maybe he did in a point that I didn't list earlier, but...
Those we see sort of waves and energy.
Yeah, right.
And he's sort of like, well, which of those is the real thing you saw?
Did you know a baby's heart begins to beat at just 3 weeks? At 5 weeks, that heartbeat can be heard on ultrasound, and this can sometimes be their only defense in the womb. That's where preborn steps in.
Well, and the thing is that
goes towards saving babies. To donate, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby. Or go to preborn.com/Jordan. That's preborn.com/Jordan.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is that hierarchy that you just described, this is the cosmic tree of life. This is Yggdrasil. It's like you have got the quantum level and the atomic level and the molecular level and so forth up to the phenomenal level. That's not where it stops. I started to understand this when I was thinking something very peculiar. This is decades ago. I thought people will go to a museum to look at Elvis Presley's guitar.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah.
So you can imagine that you have a display case and you have Elvis's guitar in it. And now you take that guitar out, let's say it's a mass-produced guitar just for the sake of argument, and you replace it with an identical model from the same year.
Yep.
Okay, now, is that Elvis's guitar? And
he's doing the same thing that I just said with the coffee question, right? Well, when you refer to a cup of coffee or when you refer to a thing that is coffee, how do you know if the substance itself is coffee? What one man refers to as coffee, another person might refer to as coffee. Does the use case of coffee matter? Is it how you use it? Is it the understanding of what it is? Is it the intentionality of, like, there's a lot of different ways you can analyze what a particular thing actually is when you're talking about like material things. But the problem is to just endlessly, I don't even know how I call it, pontification, to just endlessly inquire with no direction or aim is like the biggest form of philosophical gooning I've ever seen in my life, or philosophical edging.
People will say, and you can think it's so strange, people would say, well, even if I couldn't tell the difference, I would rather look at Elvis's guitar.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, what, is that some kind of delusion? Like, what the hell's going on here? No, the answer is, this is what Duchamp was on about when I think it was Duchamp who put the urinal in the art gallery.
Right.
So, right, what he was pointing to, and it was brilliant, was that much of what we perceive as concretely real is actually dependent on a hierarchical context that isn't part of the apprehension of the object. So when you go to see Elvis's guitar in a museum, the perception is informed by the context. It's like, well, you're an Elvis fan and you know a lot about Elvis history and you know that this is Elvis's town, and the object itself partakes in that higher order unity. That's the unity that extends off to heaven. Every object partakes in that embeddedness above. Like, for the reductionist types, you'd say, well, what's this made of, right? It's like, well, it's molecules and then it's atoms and then it's like quantum, whatever the hell exists down at the quantum level. That's what this is made of. It's like, wait a second, it's on this table. It's in this room. It's of this time. That's all this thing too.
Yep.
You know, and that's the higher order conceptualization, but it's just as much part of the object.
Yeah.
And a reductionist view doesn't take that into account, and that's a big problem.
I think it's true that, you know, looking at Ruskin's book, piece of paper, it would be silly to always say, well, what's that in the garden over there? What's a bunch of atoms bumping into each other?
Right.
That'd be ludicrous.
Right. Well, that's also, so back to our discussion of Darwinian utility.
Yes.
It's like, well, it's the wrong level of
But
functional
look,
analysis.
surely it would also be inappropriate to do the opposite. That is, like, to always think at a higher resolution than people are obviously sort of practically trying to. So, for example, if I was close enough to see, and I was interested in what paper is made of, and I said, well, what is this? And someone said, oh, it's a white square in the garden.
Yeah.
So, well, that's inappropriate. You've gone too high.
helpful. Yeah,
You've
okay.
focused down, right?
So,
and I feel like where you might criticize the reductionist materialists for going too high
Narrow,
resolution or too narrow,
yeah.
you go too wide on issues of religious historicity.
Well, you want to hit the target squarely, right? And that's hard. So in the Sermon on the Mount,
It's not hard. We do it intuitively, literally all the fucking time. It's not hard. It's actually incredibly simple, because language is something that we have developed in order to facilitate communication between two minds. If I walk in and I want to say, "Hey, are you hungry?" Technically, the question is that's kind of a complicated thing. Like, well, am I hungry? What are you implying here? Like, if I say, like sometimes somebody might come in and they go, "Oh, you hungry?" And you're like, "Nah," and you don't say no because you're not hungry at all. You say no because what you what you're assuming they're asking you is, are we going to go out and get something to eat? And do you want to go out and get something to eat with me? Or do you want me to get food? And instead of saying like, yeah, I'm kind of hungry, but I don't want any food, you're just like, no, I'm fine, or whatever. Meaning you are kind of hungry, but you're going to answer no to this because you know like we do all of this intuitively. Like every single day of our lives, we do this intuitively with how we use language. It's not hard to figure out the resolution of a particular question that somebody's giving you or a particular statement somebody's making. When a cop walks up to you and is like, where were you yesterday? And you were like, I believe it's referred to the Milky Way on planet Earth. Like, where were you? Oh, I was in my car. Where the fuck was your car? On the road. Like, we understand intuitively what's being asked, generally most of the time, right? Unless there's some communication issue. I don't know.
Oh, Christ addresses that to some degree.
Why the fuck? Okay.
So his injunction for paying attention properly takes local and distal into account simultaneously. He says, okay, this is what you have to do first of all. You orient yourself, so this is the highest level of orientation, right? So this is the divine orientation. It's the thing at the top of Jacob's ladder. It's the value at the pinnacle of the value hierarchy. You put what's properly highest first and foremost in the theater of your imagination, right? And then you align that with the belief that other people have the same intrinsic value as you and that are a reflection of that infinite value. You start there. Then you pay attention to the moment.
Yes,
right.
Tolstoy wrote about this in his Confession. He was. I love it. It's like 100 pages long. You can read it in no time.
Yeah, it's a great book.
It's a wonderful account of essentially him sort of trying to battle with his reason and his faith. And he eventually concludes that he was looking in the wrong place. He was looking amongst intellectuals.
Yeah.
And he found that he looked, I think he sort of quite dismissively called like the simple people, and just your everyday person, your working man. And he found that it was something about sort of, if you take someone who's.
If I had the opportunity to talk to Peterson again, delete this VOD, August. If I have the opportunity, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do this. Like, infinitely engage only on the like inquisitive level, or just like asking these like self-masturbatory questions, all masturbations, just asking all these like masturbatory questions. I'm just going to do this over and over and over again. And I bet he's going to say it's the most fun he's ever had in a conversation in my life. I can placate these people. I want to have this conversation with him. Let's talk philosophy. I bet he would unironically think I'm a genius. He would. True. His fans would think I'm a genius as well.
Starving. And you bring him and you tell him to sort of take this metal pump and just pump it up and down, and don't tell him why. And he does it, and the water starts flowing. It's like you have to actually do the thing, you have to live out the thing, and then you get to see why it works. So it's I understand that. I think that's probably true. He also says, Tolstoy, that is in the same account, that he found that there was an exactly inverse correlation between the specificity of an answer and like the importance of the question. I can tell you exactly how many molecules are in that glass of water, but who cares?
Right, it's irrelevant.
And the more the question becomes about humanity, human life, the important stuff, the less specific the answer necessarily has to become. So I understand there is a.
So you've alluded there to or indicated the relevance of value for perception, right? You nailed it with that observation, because as you pointed out, any phenomena can be analyzed at multiple levels of the hierarchy that it exists within. Okay, so what makes the choice of level of analysis appropriate? Well, it's something like, it is something that's akin to Darwinian utility. It's something like that. You can think about it less abstractly, is that you want the level of resolution that gives you maximal functional grip in relationship to your pursuit.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what's your pursuit? Well, two questions. What is your pursuit and what should your pursuit be?
Yeah.
Well, your pursuit's necessary.
Like, he should just tie this back to everything. Oh, well, my pursuit is to find out factually if you believe there were real material human beings that were leaving Egypt. Like, he should just ground it back in that question over and over again.
Nested inside a hierarchy of pursuits. And when I said that God is the, what would you say, the ultimate pursuit that sits at the apex of the progression of pursuits, that is Jacob's ladder. That's what that's indicating in that vision, is that every act of perception unites earth and heaven.
Yep.
And the perception itself is invisibly dependent on whatever it is you're worshiping.
But here's one problem, right?
So that's very comical.
Because I think I see what you're saying, and I hope, what I tried to do in making that video essay about your religious views, and I suppose I wasn't, the main thing I was trying to do was sort of offer an interpretation, trying to get to grips with it, and I hope that you feel as though at least I'm making an effort here to really try and get what you're thinking at. One problem is that, in the early church, there was a debate around the physicality of Jesus' resurrection.
Yes.
So the canonical tradition ends up stipulating Jesus physically resurrected.
Yes.
We're back here.
Yeah, and that's part of the Catholic particular emphasis on the divinity of the body, which has a real wisdom rather than a disembodied soul.
You also have like the Gnostic tradition, broadly speaking, the Gnostic tradition, early Christianity, that's so popular that Valentinus nearly becomes the Bishop of Rome. He's nearly the Pope.
Yeah.
And there's I talked about this the other day, and I should have looked it up. I can't remember which church father it was that was telling the church community, the early church community, when you go to a new place, don't ask to be taken to the Christian church, ask to be taken to the Catholic church, because otherwise you might end up in a Gnostic church. It was so popular.
Right.
And a lot of the Gnostic tradition says that the thing that's being gotten wrong is the idea that there was this literal resurrection.
Right.
No, the kingdom of God is here and now. The resurrection is inside of you, and you attain it through gnosis. I mean, the Gospel of Thomas, which is probably the most famous non-canonical gospel, and could have been written at the same time as like the Gospel of John. It's an early text. Doesn't even mention the resurrection. Doesn't mention crucifixion. It's a list of sayings. And the very form of that book, as one scholar whose name I've forgotten, unfortunately, has pointed out, of that collection shows that these people believe that the thing that's important is not what Jesus did, but what he said. The thing that's important is the knowledge. The thing that's important. Right. And so this resurrection stuff sort of doesn't matter. Now the thing is, in that early church community, somebody who said, well, this question of like the resurrection is a physical, historical event, that you're kind of missing the point. The thing that matters is like, the resurrection that takes place inside of every person.
Yeah.
It sort of sounds a little bit like the kind of approach that you would take. Now, if that's true, that would mean that in the early church, you'd have been condemned as a heretic. So when a modern Catholic says to you, Jordan Peterson, are you a Christian? What do you think about Catholicism? I think that the reason that they're interested is because if it's true what I'm saying, then they would have to say, I suppose at least according to my understanding of Catholicism,
that's a form of
I can't count you among my number. So I think that's probably why people are interested. And I wonder if you agree.
Well, what would you say? That would constitute a genuine form of inquiry, for sure.
And I wonder if you feel like you're, I don't know.
See, one of the things I really like about the bodily tradition of the resurrection is that what it does that's so remarkable is that it doesn't desacralize the body.
Holy shit. I feel like this. Okay, listen, I like Alex. I'm assuming Alex is going along with this because he's to have a conversation with Peterson. I feel like this is an example of why ordinary people don't like to engage with philosophy, where they feel like this is like the prime example of like, what does it mean for people to just like say so many words with no substance whatsoever? This is such an unbelievably boring conversation. Like, there's nothing of value has been stated. Nothing has been resolved. It's just been like needlessly inquiring about every single facet of a meta conversation word that blah, 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 blah. I'm good, Chief. The comment section loves it.
Maybe it happened in a...
Alex has an unmatched mastery of using emotion-free logic while still maintaining a human level of personability. This is the most detailed and well-explained version of Peterson's position on God. I am grateful that I spent all these years learning English. What a privilege it is to be able to hear and understand this conversation. Okay. You missed the part where he actually breaks through. Good one. Alex's comment section was scathing. Oh, I might check that out later. Have fun, bye.